Welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scotch Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode we'll invite a special guest to join us trawling through the magazine, and we'll discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article to a photo to a competition to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
Wriggles clear. Might just get the chip, and he does. He's scored. Oh, what a great tackle! He's done it. Oh, brilliant play. Wiggling his way. That's an excellent ball. And Didi. It's a goal. 4 for Clyde back. Excellent play.
Okay, our special guest this week is Stewart Weir. Stewart, thanks for joining us.
Good evening. Yes, glad to be here.
Brilliant. Just going to read a wee bit of your bio here. Stewart Weir is a media and PR consultant who is an award-winning journalist, was a staff writer with the Evening Times, former chief sports writer with the Scottish Mirror, and former head of sport for the Herald and Times Group. A trustee of the foundation of the My Name is Doddy in May 2018, and he embarked on co-writing Doddy's best-selling autobiography, My Name's Doddy, completing the book from the first interview to release in just 5 months. So, well done on that.
There's some people that are actually quite disbelieving of that. You know, they think it's taking about a year and 5 months. No, definitely 5 months.
No, but it's great to have you here. So,
Thank you.
Thanks for coming along. So, it's a special Christmas edition. So,
Ho, ho, ho.
You know, ding dong merrily and high. We've got a Match magazine, Match Weekly this week. It's actually on the 25th of December, 1982. So, we're spot on Christmas Day. So we've got the magazine in front of us. The front page it's a drawing of various footballers.
It's a collage. This dates this magazine before you had things like Apple Max. Because if Apple Max had been in the go, that would have been a montage of actual photographs and action shots. Whereas because it's 37 years ago, it's basically a sketch, a drawing of some of the stars and superstars of 1982.
Yeah, and it's actually by the artist Stephen McGarry, who was born in 1953 in Manchester. He's also a former record sleeve designer, and one of his records that he's designed was actually Joy Division.
He was at college with Rob Gretton. He was Joy Division's manager.
Okay. He was also a story artist on Despicable Me 2, Minions and The Secret Life of Pets, and basically he is a cartoonist god. He's been living in California since 1989, so a lot of the illustrations in the Match magazines and some in the Shoot as well that I've seen over the past is from Steve McGarry. So, you know,
he's done a picture book of Sean Connery.
Sean Connery, is that
which
right?
you can buy off his website.
I have to say the fact that you can actually recognise these players as to who they actually are.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Basically tells you that this guy's actually quite good.
Yeah.
It's not like something you look at and you sort of, you know, something that you post up online.
Oh yeah.
But I'll go into that later on. But it's like you can actually tell who these, you know, guys are. Sort of Glenn Hoddle, David Cross, Gordon Strachan, Graham Souness, Paul Mariner, Graham Ricks. And that's only one of them.
Steve
Coppell. Yeah. So, I mean, they're actually all... The link between them as well is that they actually all contribute to Match magazine as well. So, that's what they're in there. Now, it's interesting, 35 pence was the magazine. Now, we do this thing where we do a calculator what it would be, and it actually comes out as $1.75. Now, what we tend to say is $1.75... taking inflation into account is fair enough, but you wouldn't pay £1.75 for this magazine nowadays if it was, you know, it'd be in the £3, £4, £5 mark easily, I think, if you were going to pay for that. So I think just taking an inflation calculator, you know, view just doesn't give you the real cost of it. I mean, it's action packed. I think there's something like 48 pages or something in this one. I'd be more than happy paying £1.75 for this in today's money.
The big thing is, since back then, the whole thing about production within magazines and printed titles has been transformed, because a lot of the photographs that you would use in here that might be kicking around 10 a penny, it's now huge agencies that have all the archives for the photographs. So therefore, if it's somebody like Getty Images, I mean, they charge like a wounded rhino, and they're also, they're quite fond of a bit of litigation along the way. So again, your costs and overheads are just driven up by the fact you have to use, photographs.
Mm-hmm. So Match magazine itself was first published September 79, and it came out obviously against Shoot magazine. So initially, the circulation with Shoot was much higher than Match, so it didn't really make a dent on it. But it was in the mid-90s, I think, where it was sort of reinvented and republished, and it then took over then. But I think by that point, Shoot was in a bit of a downwards trajectory anyway. So I think Match got to be in the lead just at the time that everything else was sort of coming down south.
And also around that time, that same time, magazines became a little bit more niche. So you had, Gazzetta Italia magazine, the place I worked in Bristol was actually, they were the desk next to me, sort of type thing. So again, mid-90s into the late 90s, I was working for Total Football, which was all glossy, really high-end, high quality. They had also had Total Rugby. And again, magazines were in vogue then because people would actually still go and buy something tangible. Nobody had a mobile phone or internet or any of these kind of Wi-Fi things, so you actually had to buy something that you could actually read in your hand.
Yeah. So we'll take a wee delve inside, shall we? So page 2 and 3. So we've splashed out a double page, double-sided, we've splashed out. So England have just basically thrashed Luxembourg 9-0. And so they're having a chat about that. But the Match are basically saying, don't get carried away. Luxembourg are probably the worst team that England will ever face. So, again, England have a good result. But I think one thing that's been constant through the years is that the press just don't really let them have that good result. No. It's always, but just calm yourselves down. It wasn't that good. But then when they get a good result, there's always something negative that the press can take from it.
It's always, for me, quite remarkable how negative the English press are about their national football team. This probably goes back to 1966 and actually winning the World Cup, and that sets the benchmark. Yeah. And anything that comes thereafter is rank rotten or rubbish. Mm-hmm. So even though you're performing, you've got great players, and really you're punching your weight, so to speak, and reaching semi-finals or quarter-finals. These guys that actually cover, England never ease up and never relent.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that's talked about in the articles here is it says soccer chiefs are slammed for playing Russian roulette with England's international future. So before the game, the weekend, England are still playing internationals at the weekend, and then they're playing. The league are playing fixtures at the weekend, and then they're playing important internationals. Okay, Luxembourg isn't, but I mean, this is something which is rearing its head. It seems to rear its head every year or every 2 years or something. It's like, what can we do to improve the chances? I know we'll have a week off. And this is back in 1982, and we're still having that conversation today. It's like, let's have a weekend off. Let's have the week off and prepare properly. Make sure there's no injuries, or gives time to improve. And even back then, this was still going on. I think Terry Butcher did say that there was a game previously that they had, I think it was a friendly that they played in, and they'd been given this time off and they won, quite comfortably. So, I mean, he's pointing towards that, and he points towards the fact that at the World Cup they're spending all this time together, so they're developing this bond, this understanding. So again, it points to the more time they spend together, the better the team, and the better the rapport that happens then, which makes sense. And to be honest, I don't know why we don't do that. It's like we moan and we complain about what can we do to improve the Scottish game, what can we do to improve the international game, and it just seems to me a simple thing. Before any internationals, let's make sure all our guys aren't playing.
But it's a bit like the kind of option they're looking at in terms of having a week off, get into the playoffs in March. Surely if you are targeting qualification, you have to cover all eventualities. My problem with that is you don't wait until mid-season before you then start marking on your calendar that this could be you might need to take a free week. Who are the legislators? If you're doing your job, you are planning so far in advance. You know, I get things in from the rugby authorities who are equally criticised, but they know their programme for 2021. You know, the Lions are going to South Africa, and I know it's a big assignment, but they printed their fixtures up last week, so you know 18 months in advance what you're going to be doing, and therefore you can prepare. Everything seems to, in Scotland especially, just seems to be such a shock. How did this happen? You know, we didn't expect this, but we've actually qualified for something.
But it raises a good point. I mean, because I hear of these people who their title is fixture secretary. You think, well, what else are you doing if you're not, looking at what fixtures are coming up? And surely you're not just saying, well, I know what's coming up in the next week, the next 2 weeks.
That's right. Your pre-planning has to be as such that if you can decide that the end of the season is going to be such and such a date because you might qualify for a tournament that summer, surely that's your starting point to work back from. Mm-hmm. If that's your ultimate goal and you know when that's taking place, surely then all of your considerations are in and around qualifying for that tournament. Therefore, it's not just something it's sprung upon you or sprung upon you as a fan.
Absolutely. Okay, so one of the other things I'm just pointing out from this article is that Match describes Luther Blissett as the black bombshell, which,
that was kind of thing that was quite prevalent in that era. Mm-hmm.
It still is in Italy just now.
Right, yeah, well, there was that Black Friday headline recently, yeah.
So if we move on to page 4 and 5, this is Christmas with the Stars. Now, when you open that up, the first thing that obviously takes your attention is
a picture of Farrah Fawcett.
No, at this point it's just Farrah Fawcett Majors. So you can age it that way. So, looking at that instantly, you think, who's a bit of a geezer? The one of these is saying, basically, I'm being asked the question, what do you want in your stocking from Santa? And somebody has said Farrah Fawcett Majors, but we'll get to that. So what we have here is a selection of stars who have been asked Christmas questions. John Richards of Wolves, David Moss of Luton Town, Lou Macari of Man United, Tony Morley of Aston Villa, and Eric Gates of Ipswich Town. Now we'll have a look at the questions, and now what I think we'll do, since it's Christmas, I think we'll go around the table and maybe ask ourselves here what the answers would be. So starting with you, Stuart. So where would you like to spend Christmas Day?
I am quite happy behind a locked door at home. It's the one kind of day that you think to yourself, everything else gets switched off, including the TV at times, and you basically just want a bit of peace and quiet and tranquility to spend time with your own folk. So that would be. I think John Richards basically said that, at home, I can't think of anywhere better to spend on Christmas Day. I would agree with him.
Absolutely. So I bet that's essentially going to answer your next question as well. So where will you spend Christmas Day?
I'll be in Dubai.
Okay.
No, I will be at home.
Yeah. So who would you most like to spend Christmas Day with?
Well, I see these guys.
Apart from Farrah Fawcett Majors.
I see these guys have basically have basically mentioned comedians and the likes. Listen, I'm all for that, but again, I think a lot of this it's the one day that a great many people who work in different jobs and different roles and all the rest of it. It's the one day that they can actually say, I want to spend this with certain individuals from my own family and friends. And again, I think that for me is quite important.
Yeah.
I've got two elder daughters. One through her husband's tied up, and it's the busiest time of the year for them because it's the middle of the panto season. Mm-hmm. I have another daughter who works for the NHS as a theatre operative in Wishaw, and she doesn't really get many Christmases off. So anything that sees her getting a day off at that, I'm actually quite pleased about.
No, that's great. I mean, for me, I think it's definitely a family thing. If you can, It's about spending just down in tools, as you say. I mean, it's 24/7, 364 days a year, really constant, isn't it? So it's nice to have that one day where you can just say, like,
Except the world of newspapers. So Christmas Day is a working day. Because, you suddenly you go to a party and somebody said, you were working today? Why are you working today? Because idiots like you want to buy papers on Boxing Day for no apparent reason. You know what I mean? It's the day you get off is Christmas Eve, because you don't print papers on Christmas Day.
Is that still the case?
It's still the case.
Yeah.
But again, you do wonder if there is just going to be some sort of seismic shift on that one at some where one, are they still going to be printing papers?
Yeah.
And secondly, the whole thing about digital or online presence, it is 24/7, 365 days a year. So there's no let up. And people, you can still work from home, but ultimately you end up working from an office, and I couldn't think of anything worse. Well, it's fine if you can do that, but again, somebody has to man the desk.
Yeah.
And even going back a couple of years ago when it worked out that we could actually take an extra day off in between, get everybody in on the Saturday after the game, completed the entire newspaper, and all it took was somebody actually pressing the button on the Sunday to send the Monday paper out. So it was one guy.
Yeah.
We weren't going to touch it after that because basically there was nothing happening. So again, sometimes it works in your favour, but I think I still think there's people going to be called upon in all lines of work, and my sympathies goes out to them.
Yeah, quite right. Anybody out there at the moment who's working in the newspaper industry on Christmas Day, we really feel sorry for you that you have to work. So there we go.
But celebrate, you're still working in the newspaper industry.
Exactly. Yeah, there is still a newspaper industry. Yeah. So, what present would you most like to get at Christmas? For the man who's got everything.
It would need to be something exotic, and I'm looking at this picture of Farrah Fawcett Majors, but she wouldn't come close to something with.
Just remember, you've got two questions here. One is what would you like, and one is what you're going to get.
Well, I know. I think I know what I'm going to get, but it's I think anything to do with four wheels would greatly please me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you're a petrol head.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The quicker and more powerful, the better.
Yeah. So, and what are you going to get for Christmas?
Oh, I think I'm going to get something a little bit different, like a chainsaw.
That's fair enough. Yeah. Is that true?
Yeah.
Is there a reason that you need a chainsaw?
It was. Yeah, there is, because I do a lot of cutting up of wood. I should add at this point in time, just in case the local constabulary.
Is that why there's a quote about I place it in just behind bomb disposal and juggling chainsaws?
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't just plucked out of fresh air.
No, it's for a very good purpose and a very good reason.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll just have. I mean, you've touched on some of their answers there, so we can touch on John Richards. So he's going to spend it at home. Les Dawson is who we'd like to spend Christmas with, but he's going to spend it with his wife and two girls instead, and it's obviously a bit of a hardship for him. What he would like for Christmas is a couple of goals for Derby. He's on loan there at the moment from Wolves, and champagne to celebrate. And it comes up with people to realise the responsibilities to football and be just as forthcoming with praise as with criticism, and that is for his. What would you like for Christmas for football?
Yeah.
Which it seems a bit of a strange thing to. He's obviously taken a bit of stick, I think, but we'll go with that. So next up is David Moss. He's from Whitney, but he says that he'd like to spend it in a big posh hotel so his wife doesn't need to cook. So there's brownie points there. He'd like to spend it with cannon and ball, which I have a bit of a. I remember enjoying Cannonball when I was a wee boy, but I've got this event that happened which sort of has coloured me against him. It was my 16th birthday, and I had a wee bit of cash to spend, relative cash. And so I'm like, what am I going to do? And my best friend at the time said, let's go see Cannonball in Glasgow. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to go see Cannonball. So I basically gave in, went to see Cannonball, and it's my 16th birthday. I went to see Cannonball.
Anticlimax.
It was more disappointing than that. Honestly, I'd rather have done anything else than that. But so David goes on. He would like a new BMW car for Christmas. Fair enough. And his present for football, he'd like to end hooliganism, and he would like 15 goals. So, you know, it's still been a wee bit personal there. Lou McCarry. So Lou scored 91 goals in 2 seasons for Celtic reserves. So that's actually quite an impressive stat for Lou there before he went to the first team.
There's a few guys made their name with Celtic reserves over a period of time who scored a phenomenal amount of goals.
Yeah.
The two that sort of when I was started out in journalism, the two that I will always remember was Jerry Britton and Diggle McCarrison. I mean, those guys scored an absolute barrelload of goals and never really got very much a look in at Celtic because they always had somebody who was bigger and better and more tried and tested and maybe even more prolific.
It was the same thing, that Quality Street era. I think Vic Davidson scored probably more goals than Dalglish as they were coming through. But again, Vic Davidson, he got a run in the Celtic.
Well, he did, and he was a really good player for Motherwell for a period of time as well. And you could tell he actually could play the game. Like so many footballers at that time who had been released by Celtic or Rangers and some of other teams like Hibs and Hearts, they went elsewhere and just stuck out like a sore thumb because they were actually really, really good players. And you could tell why, like Jock Stein at Celtic would have seen something in Davidson as a player, because when he went elsewhere, you still knew he was the guy that probably played for Celtic.
Yeah. It's probably the sort of player that their fans would say, oh, this is the sort of player that could step up and play for Celtic.
I don't think you see that now.
Yeah.
I think you see guys getting into teams and it's like there's an ex-Man United guy, an ex-Rangers guy, an ex-Hibs guy and an ex-Runcorn player, and they all look the same. Yeah. There's nobody looks different.
On that, I think this academy thing is maybe to blame for that a wee bit, because, so many people can get into academies, whereas not so many people could have got into the Celtic reserves or the Rangers reserves or the youth team or something like that. And I think players think once they've just got into an academy, they think to a degree they've made it. Yeah. So when they come out, if they get released, it's a reason they've been released.
Whereas back then, you got to that level after you'd been scouted, but a scout would only have watched it maybe a dozen times. Sometimes they see somebody after 3 games and it's like, this guy is the real deal. But they would have somebody watching somebody over the best part of a season. So you knew when you did make an approach, this was somebody who you thought could get better and had also probably proven themselves against different levels of opposition. You could see in terms of their growth and their stature and the sort of physical presence, whether they were going to get bigger, whether they were just staying the same size. Yeah. All of these things basically were just stuck in wee notebooks or under somebody's cap. Whereas today, you get guys running about with GPS systems on them, wondering where they are on the pitch, let alone what casino they're in. Yeah. And that for me just shows you that it doesn't matter, all the technology, identifying real talent still has to be done with the naked eye, and has to be done with the naked eye over a period of time.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So let's take a look at Lou's answers. So where would they like to be for Christmas? At the top of the first division, hopefully there until May, so that's fair enough. And where will he actually be? He says he'll be at home, but he'll have to go running to run off the pudding. Now his people that he'd like to spend: Russ Habit, Benny Hill, or Gordon McQueen, who's very funny now.
3 comedians.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Gordon McQueen's obviously a bit of a joker there. Benny Hill, I never really got Benny Hill when I was younger. Russ Abbott.
Christmas number 1.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Ernie.
Oh, the Ernie one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Man in the West.
Yeah. So he wants to spend life with his 3 boys, Michael, Paul and Jonathan, and he wants an inflatable ref for Ashley Grimes. So it alludes to the fact that he was sent off at West Ham and there's been a bit of ribbon for that. So that's probably sounds like dressing room banter there, that you had to be there.
When being sent off was still an event. Seriously, when being sent off was something you would actually remember, not only an everyday occurrence.
And maybe actually take some stick for it rather than just as another occurrence. But this one at the end here. So how would you like to change football? He says there's nothing wrong with football apart from people who keep knocking it, which it seems it's a bit of a refreshing thing that maybe it's like, well, the game is good as it is, so just stop trying to change it, stop trying to meddle with it. So I think that was a.
I don't think there's. I don't think. We're all football fans, and people will say, "Oh, you don't like football because of what you say." Maybe I say the things that I do say in disappointment because I know the football today is not what I grew up with.
Yeah.
I really don't think players. They might be fitter, they might be faster, they might be better athletes. In terms of what they can actually do with a ball, and in terms of how good they are, skill level, I don't think they're anywhere near what guys were like with balls that weren't actually round and on pitches that looked as if they'd been, they had come from a reenactment of the Somme. I mean, you look at some of the old footage of these pitches, and the ball does not roll across the surface. It basically bobbles and hops and skips, and these guys could still control the ball and still shoot and still score.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. So, Tony Morley, let's move on. So what does Tony say? He'd rather spend the whole day in bed watching cartoons, but he's going to be training in the morning, then have a quiet Christmas lunch. Now, who would he like to spend Christmas with? Farrah Fawcett Majors. So here we go. Tony's the bit of the geezer, the bit of the lad.
But you have to say he's also the good-looking guy that might have half a chance.
To be fair, that's a very good point. Yeah, certainly from the lineup that we've got here. But he also does add all the girls from Hot Gossip. So he's hedging his bets there.
Yeah, it's good for him. It's good for him to actually see that there might be a second choice.
Yeah, and as you say, some people, if they gave that as an answer, would be reaching. But maybe he's actually in there with a shout. So good luck to you on Christmas Day there, Tony. But where is he actually going to spend it with? His landlady. So unless his landlady Farrah Fawcett Majors, I think he's in for a big disappointing. How he like to see football change. He wants an increase in crowds to the games. So this is one of the things that I've noticed when I look back is crowds. I think for certain clubs, certain teams, and I'll take the Scottish teams in particular. So if you look back, Celtic and Rangers crowds were a lot less than what they are at the moment. But the other teams, I think, were all generally a lot more in some occasions. 6,000 for St Mirren. 12,000 at Dundee United and things like that. So I think the crowds have been bigger in the past for the more provincial clubs, but the bigger clubs, I mean, we're talking about 15,000, 20,000, 25,000, where, you could say the stadium, but the stadium's held a lot more back then as well.
Yeah, which sort of plays into the thing that I would always suggest, that people don't actually support the top teams for football reasons. It's because the quality of the football, as I say, if you go back and you look at, say, even 20 years ago, you look at the teams that the Old Firm had and that were playing games on reruns in Sky Sport, they don't even match up anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got guys saying, well, the League Cup final, how many Rangers players would get in the Celtic team and that kind of thing. If you take it back then 20 years ago, how many of the current Celtic team would get in that team from 1999 who didn't win anything? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It was like that was Rangers were dominant that season. And again, you're looking at guys now that are held up as being, they're fantastic players, and they probably are. But even going back 20 years ago, they're not a patch on what Scottish football had then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most probably difficult thing in football is to do that comparison in different eras, and it's probably the most pointless thing as well.
It is up to a point when you know what you're watching today as being the top level, isn't the same as the top level that you had.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like whether it's the same in all things. Whether it's the suit that you wear just now, you just know it's not the same as the maybe come to the suits later on as well. But you know, it's the exact same. It's a car that you drive. Okay, it might have more gadgetry, but it's not the same. It's not. It doesn't give you the same feeling that it did like 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So again, it's the evolution of football.
So the last one here, I think, is Eric Gates. So Eric comes from Ferry Hill in Durham, and the reason I give you that information is it sort of becomes clear in his answers that I think he misses home.
He's homesick.
There's absolutely no doubt about that. So basically he wants to spend his Christmas in Geordieland, he calls it. So he wants to spend it back in the northeast, but instead he'll be training in the morning, followed by a lunch with his family. He'd like to spend it with relatives and friends in the northeast, so he mentions the northeast again, but he'll spend it with his wife and son and a new arrival due anytime soon. Backs up this theory that we have. So what would he like for Christmas? He'd like a phone call from a manager with 50,000 to spend. So he's obviously thinks I quite like a wee move, and I wonder where he would like a wee move to.
Probably somewhere in Geordieland.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, I mean, this was 1982, and he spent another 3 seasons at Ipswich Town before moving to Sunderland. So he did get his move back up north as well. So Christmas did come, even though a little bit late for him. So moving on to page 6 and 7. So top mark, Stoke City manager Richie Barker presents keeper Mark Harrison with the Match Weekly First Division Match Man of the Month award, with his displays against Liverpool and Man United noted. So
I wonder if he's still got it.
Well,
behind the microwave.
I mean, he only made 7 league appearances for Stoke City and left in 1984 after injury problems. But he had a bit of a journey after that. So he played for South African side Hellenic, then returned to the UK and played in non-league. But he then had a managerial career. So it started off at Stafford Rangers, and then he went to manage the Bangladesh national team. He managed Fortune in South Africa, Huraya in the Maldives, Umpa Malanga, Black Aces in South Africa, African Warriors, Bay Stars, Chippa United, Golden Arrows, Caps United in Zimbabwe, Township Rollers in Botswana, and Harare City in Zimbabwe again.
And Mpumalanga, which ties into your reference earlier on to a certain Mr. Doddy Weir. That was where he was kicked out of the Lions tour. That's where he was injured. As Jim Telfer famously said, nothing good comes out of Mpumalanga.
Apart from Mark Harrison, maybe. But you know, he's obviously, I mean, he's getting this award. He's not set the heather alight in his football career by the looks of it in his playing side, but he's had a bit of a varied and quite colourful career there.
There's a lot of people like that in football, isn't there? They reach a certain level as a player, and then they go into coaching, and again they only reach a certain level.
Yeah.
But that level is almost like where so many people want to shop. You know, it's like literally you will never be out of work.
It's that thing. Once you're in the door, you just bounce around. I mean, that's so noticeable with so many clubs and so many managers. It's like the same, you know, we talk about it, the same people are always...
Well, it's the Sam Allardyce, Alan Pardew, kind of guys that bounce around similar
Exactly,
clubs.
and you do wonder why that is, because, okay, they have some successes of that, but there's a lot of them that just don't have successes, and what is it that, you know, attracts a director or an owner to think... I think, do you know what? Now I've just said it, it's probably the same thing that managers, if there's a player who has, you know, undoubted talent, but there's something not right, they're not reaching that talent, every manager always thinks, I'm the one that's going to get it out of them. So maybe that's the same with the directors. They think, I'm the one that's going to get this manager.
I can give you a hugely long answer in that one, I really could. But in effect, it is, if you are a chairman or a board of directors or an owner who have to placate fans and sponsors and the likes, if I go out and say the best guy to be the next manager of Hearts is Andy Smith, right, and give you the job and you accept, great. If you bomb, everybody will say, why did they pick him? Whereas if you go back to the tried and tested, even if they're not that good, you're actually covering your back.
Yeah, there's a reason that you can see
damage
the
limitation,
record that,
correct. Damage limitation exercise, and as much as you're going to somebody who's actually been in that job, rather than giving it to somebody completely new and completely fresh, which is seen as being a gamble. Whereas if you give it to somebody who's been around the block, it's not perceived as being quite the gamble, even though you know it is.
It's a sad world we live in where you're thinking that just as you're actually getting somebody into a job. It's like, how can I deal with this when it goes
Correct.
wrong?
But I know managers, and I know one in particular who didn't get a very high or a relatively high profile job at one time because they spent more time negotiating what would happen if he got the sack and what his payoff would be and what the terms and conditions of that would be. And he did it for such a prolonged period that eventually one of the guys, watching the sort of the beauty contest unfold, stood up and said, "I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I've had enough. Do you want to manage this team, or are you basically just hanging about here to see what happens at the end of it? Because if that's the case, I'm out and I'm finished speaking to you." And he never got that job. And I have to say, he's become slightly tarnished ever since then.
Okay, I've sort of got an idea who that might be, but I'm not going to say it.
You can write the initials there then.
That's multitasking. I'll leave that till later. So moving on, there's a couple more things. Joy of the Rovers. So 4th Division Tranmere Rovers were given the ideal Christmas gift as a £200,000 deal was agreed with the local Wirral Council that will prevent them from closing their doors this month. So it all seems that for quite a while, Tranmere Rovers are always diced with the proverbial death there. Kitchen sinker. Former Orient striker Peter Kitchen is back after an unhappy spell in Hong Kong. He's currently training at Orient. I love this quote from him. He says, "Hong Kong isn't the place the holiday brochures make out. I stayed in a small, dingy flat in a dirty part of town." And it's like, if people think football is all sex and drugs and rock and roll, just you speak to Peter Kitchen.
It's like the Derek Riordan one, isn't it? Going to China, and I didn't really like Chinese food. So what did you expect
Or as
to find?
they call it over there, food. Bob's blunder. So Bob Wilson makes a boob co-presenting Match of the Day. At the end, he meant to say, "Don't forget to watch Match of the Day" in relation to the Sunday programme, but instead he said, "Don't forget to miss Match of the Day." Did I get that right as well, or did I mess that up?
I think you got it right.
Did I get that? Maybe that shows you how
You're in good
easy.
company.
That shows you how
Another
easy
good
that was.
goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Another good goalkeeper.
Right off, Bruce has a point to prove. So Liverpool keeper Bruce Grobbelaar was once advised that he'd never make the grade as a goalkeeper by ex-pro Roy Bailey. And Roy Bailey just happens to be the father of United keeper Gary Bailey. So I think Bruce got the last word on that one. Bid for charity. There's an autographed programme of the North Counties East Lakeside Shep Shed Charters House historic trip in the FA Cup against Preston, where Preston won 5-1. So that programme was up for auction and it's signed by both teams. And it was being auctioned in aid of Maincap. Now, quite an interesting thing about that Shep Shed Charter. It was quite a... If you say that in a Sean Connery accent, it might work. Shep Shed.
You might drown as well.
But they were actually managed by Martin O'Neill for a few months back in 1989. So there we go. That was quite an interesting fact, I thought. A gift for Kenny. So we have a photograph of Arsenal fullback Kenny Sansom with his daughter Natalie sitting on his shoulders, with Kenny wearing a t-shirt that was a gift from Natalie that reads, "To Daddy, love Natalie." So that's quite nice. Billy socks it to Charlie. So
I like this story.
Yeah. Do you want to go over the story? Shall I say the story first and then you can, or do you want to go for it?
Go, no.
Okay, I'll read it. So Charlie Nicholas turned up to training at Celtic without any socks on, as it was a fashionable thing at the time. However, Celtic manager Billy McNeil was having the end of it, so he threatened to fine Charlie if it happened again. So this seemed to do the trick until one day Charlie comes in again without any socks. But it turns out he'd been driving to the ground without the socks and then putting them on in the car. But on this occasion, he just forgot to put them on.
The devil that he is.
So in that case, he was sitting there not thinking, I guess.
Well, I guess. But my fashion story about Charlie Nicholas was, there was a time where everybody in Lark Hall had maybe didn't have a lot of things, but they always had good suits because of Dak Simpson's. So basically, what you would do is you would go into Marks and Spencer's, see a suit that you like, try it on, and then pass on the relevant information to somebody who worked in Dak Simpson's, and lo and behold, you'd have new togs for a wedding or a christening or a day out or whatever it was. And same with jackets, and they had a range. Dak Simpson, it was Simpsons of Piccadilly, and they had their signature range. And what they used to do was, if you can imagine, I got a jacket from there, and I walked into House of Fraser, and the guy clocked me right away with this jacket. He came across, "Oh, you would like, looking at a jacket, sir?" I went, "No, not really." Oh, because I was wearing this jacket. Now, I think at that time I was earning about 56 quid a week. The jacket was about 70 odd quid. You know what I mean? So you've got to clock somebody wearing that kind of jacket. Yeah. Anyway, this signature range, what they used to do was so all the jackets are in a rack, and so you don't have to go in to see what it is. They used to stitch a little bit of cloth onto the actual sleeve that said signature, or it said Piccadilly or whatever it was, so you knew that's what you were looking at, right? So I cannot remember where it was. It's something like Cardinal Follies or wherever we were. And we walked in, and obviously these jackets cost a few quid, so only certain people could afford them unless they lived in Lark Hall. Yeah. And one of these guys that was wearing these fancy jackets was Charlie Nicholas. But these wee labels were, when you purchased the jacket, you were supposed to cut them off, right? It was only for identification purposes, and it turned up at his disco. As I say, it was Cardinal Follies or someplace, and here's Charlie with a good jacket on, with the wee bit of cloth still stitched down to the sleeve.
Because it's designer, yeah.
Because it's designer, and it's just like. I think one of my mates had to basically feed me a pint to shut me up from laughing as I was trying to tell folk this. But, again, not many people were interested in it, but it was something that amused me, still amuses me greatly, that somebody thinks, I'm earning top dollar, therefore I've got to flash it and wear these wee tags.
But I guess it just sort of highlights, Charlie's came from a different background than background that he would know that information. So, I think just highlights the fact that he was on the way up at the time.
Yeah, and he was buying things that, going back 37 years ago, if you like to call them working class, ordinary folk couldn't really afford. Do you know what I mean? He was buying the designer stuff.
Leather trousers.
Leather trousers, aye. Don't say it, my brother had a leather suit. It was, he looked a bit like Paul Young, it was,
whatever happened to the talcum industry once leather suits and trousers and that, stopped getting sold as much?
You've obviously never been in some of the queues that I've been in of late. White powder wafting everywhere.
That's not talcum, yeah.
So that's a story that made its way into Billy McNeil's autobiography, Hail Caesar. It was brought to my attention that Charlie never wore socks, winter or summer, and as feet are the principal tools of a footballer's trade, it concerned me he might be doing himself some damage because of this unusual habit, which I felt was unhygienic. Presumably it was some sort of fashion statement, and Charlie was always in the height of fashion. But no matter that Charlie had quickly become a key player, I warned him if he didn't conform, I was going to fine him and leave him out of the team. However, typical Charlie, having promised to start wearing socks, as soon as he left the ground after training, he would head straight for his car and promptly remove his footwear. I got to hear of this and one day waited until Charlie was about to get behind the wheel before telling his closest buddy at Celtic, Danny Craney, to relay the message that I wanted to see him straight away. Having done his usual quick change by the time Danny reached the car park, Charlie had no option but to report to my office minus his socks. "How much did your socks cost?" I asked. "A £5, gaffer," replied Charlie. "Right," I declared. "I'm fining you a £5 and I'll go on doing so every time I catch you disobeying my instructions." Charlie protested that I couldn't do that, but of course I could, and I did. Mind you, it was a bit of fun more than anything, a light-hearted way of demonstrating to Charlie exactly who was boss.
That's brilliant.
So like you say again, a £5 for a pair of socks.
Yeah. I remember that fight. Remember Charlie missed that European tie with athlete's foot. Do you remember that? Because it wasn't very hygienic. In all seriousness, do you think that's what's going to stop you playing in a game, just not wearing socks? But again, it's it's maybe a level of the naivety. You know, this reading through this, and as I have done a couple of times, you're suddenly aware that this is an entirely different world to the one that we now live in.
Yeah. See, on the what you just said from Billy there, I'd sort of question that Billy was doing it because of the hygiene and because you feel. I think he was just doing it to say, stop being a stupid wee boy.
No.
Stop, you know, it's like, get a grip. You're playing for Celtic.
Exactly, and you've got responsibility, and you should be, you know, sort of when it comes to tact and decorum, you should be carrying yourself in a certain way. Walking about without socks on, or trying to enter the training ground with flip flops or whatever it is, just isn't the done thing.
No, I've not done it for many a year.
Not since the reruns of Miami Vice went on.
So we're on to a Merry Christmas. Jones is happy to be back in London. So coming from a journalist, I would say background, but that sort of sounds as if it's part-time for you. But they've done that thing where they've done Chris in uppercase. It's like, you know, it's Chris Jones, so Christmas. You know, you've got to you give your headline right on the day off for that, don't you?
Well, again, this date, don't get me wrong, there's some people try to sell these ideas even now, but that almost dates when this would be seen as being something edgy.
Yeah.
Because what you've done is you've altered the font size to give it Christmas. Whereas now you'd have somebody putting snow across the top of his name or something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And make it a bit jazzier sort of type thing. You had limited tools to work with, and you know, back then, and I would imagine that, I mean, their state of the art kind of stuff would be, you know, putting what we would describe as like that there's a wob, so that's white on black, but to then do on the next page to print white on red, it's quite edgy. It costs money as well because it's three different runs.
I have to admit that certainly in some of the early 70s shoot magazines, it seems as though you can tell when they've got a delivery of a new set of fonts.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like we're going to use these.
New toys.
It doesn't matter if it fits with the thing. We're going to use these old fancy fonts, and so.
I remember about early 90s. There was this new kind of gizmo came in on Apple Macs, and it was putting flames. It was setting fire to everything. So everything, it didn't matter what it was, looked like it started Bonanza because you had flames. You know. I think it was somebody say Tommy Burns or something. It was burning ambition. It had nothing to do with Tommy Burns. It was Celtic, but you need to get Tommy in the headline so we could make it burning ambition and put all these flames all over the back page. And you know, as one of my former editors once said, having picked up the paper and found the pages on fire on about 7 or 8 different pages, he said we should be putting fire extinguishers on the other page.
So you've turned over there, and it's fun time. So I've made the point before that
Snow.
Yeah, snow exactly. Yeah, good point. So I've made the point before that in these magazines, very seldom do things that they try and make funny turn out to be funny. So cartoons, jokes, humorous articles and stuff like that. And I don't actually remember finding them enjoyable or funny at the time. When as a wee boy you've got a sense of humour that's a lot different than you would as an adult. But I don't remember. However, I actually found a couple of these all right.
So you're at stage in life.
No, but so there's a one. There's a wee boy walking in, and his mum and dad are in bed, and he's shouting, "Hey mum, Dad, Santa's been!" And he's kicked a ball just as his dad raises his head. I had a wee sort of, not a laugh, but just a wee at that. The other one I found not as funny. It was the goalkeeper. So there's a goalkeeper in the net, and he's filled up the goal line with lots of snowmen, and the ref just comes up and says, "Explain yourself." And he says, "I was lonely." And so listen, I'm finding what humour I can hear out of it. I think it probably backs up my thing that they're not funny.
But snow in football is a thing of the past.
Yeah,
isn't it? I mean, how many? I mean, I remember famously Hamilton Accies being on Scott Sport playing against Airdrie one year when they turned Douglas Park into the Sahara Desert just to get it on because they were going to get this money. Because I think it was only 4 games on in Scotland or something like that. And nowadays, games are off, not because of what it might do in terms of the players, because the fans can't travel in that, or the surrounds of the football ground haven't been salted. I mean, at what point in time do we actually, say to ourselves, we have a duty to take care of ourselves and not worry about how other people are going to take care of us?
Do you think there was a spate of injuries getting to games in the past? Do you think there was a...
But there were no numbers to phone and have a claim.
That's probably...
If I ever come back, Back to the Future, and I've got my sporting almanac book, the one thing I'll be doing is maybe put it in one shelf and then opening up a claims business, because I think there were a hell of a lot more claims back then.
No, you're going to burn in hell for that, I'm afraid. So just down at the bottom here, we've got the goalkeepers. It's an advert, and it's Goalkeeper Schools 1982. And this is a National Goalkeeper Centre in Ipswich with Ray Clemens, Paul Cooper. It does mention Bruce Grobler, but he says it's based in Manchester, and Phil Parks. So you send a form away with a 12.5 stamp for more information in a booking form. The photo has, and I love this photo because it has Paul Cooper, the goalkeeper, with a bunch of young lads around him, focused on him, giving some coaching. But what he's got, he's basically pinned this young boy's face right into the ground. And I'm thinking, I don't remember ever being coached about what happens when the big centre forward, puts your face into the ground.
That's
so obviously Paul knows his stuff.
This is the advanced course.
yeah. And, I don't know if you just scream referee. I don't know how you get out of that one. So on to the next one, Graham Souness, the Graham Souness column. So this was a regular column within the magazine.
Amazing.
We're not finished yet. And before we start, I'd just like to point out this is nothing to do with Antti Niemi, okay? Whenever I hear finished, it's the same with Gary Lineker. As soon as he posts something, you know what the first 3 or 4 responses are going to be, don't you?
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to go into what that is. I think if you know, you know. So we're not finished yet, and no, it's not about Antti Niemi. So Scotland now have to win all the remaining matches in the European Championship in order to qualify for a place in the finals. 1984 was in France, and here's a spoiler: we didn't make it.
Oh no!
So after a disappointing defeat to Belgium, when we got beat 3-2, it was reflected that although the result was disappointing, the nature of the performance had positives. This followed a 2-0 defeat in Switzerland. So against Belgium, they had 3 chances and scored 3 goals. Scotland went ahead twice with 2 from Dalglish, but missed a penalty courtesy of Frank Gray. Now I remember it's very few games that I remember watching as a wee boy, but I remember watching this game, and I remember that penalty. And I remember the penalty for not watching it. I think I went behind it, and I don't normally do this, but I went behind the couch, and I think just in my mind I thought, I'm going to miss this. There was just something about it, and we missed it.
He had a pretty good strike rate.
Oh yeah,
as a penalty taker. The thing I remember from that game is, and it still annoys me to this day, is that was one of the sort of top 10 greatest Scottish performances for being Scottish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We are still referring. Do you remember that goal Dalglish scored against Belgium? Yeah, we do. But ultimately, what did it get us?
Yeah.
We still lost 3-2. I wish there was something you just, expunge all the goals that Scotland have scored over the years. If you lose, you're not allowed to remember the goals. We would have nothing to remember.
Such a the Lee Griffiths goal, the penalty kicks and stuff, and it's like it means nothing.
Exactly.
It means nothing because we threw it away.
Exactly. I remember meeting somebody in Glasgow that night. Absolutely gone. Zonkoed. Celebrating Scotland's 2-1 victory, because when he decided he was going to leave, Scotland were still 2-1 up. He knew nothing about the equaliser.
No.
I was working at the Herald at the time. I had to go into the office on the Monday, and it was, we were unlucky. No, we weren't unlucky. We were naive beyond belief.
So I think up until the last 5 minutes, we weren't that great.
No.
You know, we weren't in the game, and then we scored those 2 brilliant goals, absolutely fantastic goals. And I remember being in the house watching it, and just gone mental, and it was like, that's how you want to support Scotland. That's what you want from Scotland. Just those moments, even if they're few and far between, you want those moments. But
we'd
then
been gate crashed by Rod Stewart at that point in time.
Yeah.
He thought the box that we were in was having a far better time. And him and Tom Hunter came and joined our hoolie rather than the one that they were actually in. But no, again, and then if you go to goals that we lost, you've got 2 routes to take when you break from defence, and the ball is played infield to a danger area rather than going further wide. And then when you look at the goal, when the cross comes in, if Gordon had stood where he was and was still there, he would have collected the ball in front of his eyes. Except when the ball was delivered, he backpedaled and Kane came onto it.
Yeah.
And it's like your goalkeeper has actually sold the jerseys in that one, which is, again, I'm disappointed, but I'm really disappointed because we should have won that game. We really should have won that game.
It's what is in the modern game that all this coaching about is about gameplay and managing it, and that's exactly what that situation was. You manage that moment, and we just did it like schoolboys.
Yeah.
We should have went long, put it in the corner, got up the park, pressed up, something. Just don't do what we did.
I think it was it Armstrong who broke from
Armstrong,
defence, and to my mind, he passed to a Celtic teammate rather than passing it wide to somebody else, because his trust was in his Celtic teammate as opposed to trusting the guy who was actually in open water, so to speak. And that just turned into an absolute fatal mistake.
So you actually touched on, so that, you know, as much as we're talking about this, the Kenny Dalglish goal was a thing of beauty.
Oh, it was, yeah.
I mean, he turns, spins on the edge of the box, sidesteps a player and then kills it into the top corner. I mean, it was, for me, it's one of the top Scotland goals. But unfortunately, 3-2.
I believe it was Dalglish's last goal as well. It was his 29th and 30th.
Yeah, the first one was set up, I think it was a sort of 1-2 type thing with Archibald. Yeah. Souness gives praise to England for their 9-0 trouncing of the mighty Luxembourg. Okay, fair enough. I mean, that was an easy...
We'd show you how difficult it would be in a couple of years after that, wouldn't we?
Was it Luxembourg?
0-0.
Who was it? They went ahead in the first minute or something, and then they came back and they won against
San
England.
San Marino.
San Marino.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, but
how we cheered for a minute.
we managed to draw 0-0 with Luxembourg. You know, again, another one of the great nights of embarrassment.
So, you know, in the column we're saying we have to win all our matches to get through, and the reality was we finished Belgium, Switzerland, East Germany, Scotland, and we won 1 game for the whole tournament. We drew 2. So, yeah.
Was that the opening game? We beat East Germany in the opening?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes, but we'll backtrack on that.
The thing for me is the fact you have Graham Souness, the captain of Scotland, a European Cup winner, and a Liverpool stalwart, writing a column. Now, again, if you think of the profile that Souness had in football at that time as a player, I mean, he's absolutely top dollar, and he's writing for...
So how I know you said sort of ghostwriting, but how would this have worked? Would it have been a phone call with somebody that
you would have somebody. What happens is you have talking to Anthony Hawkswell. So you'd have somebody on your staff. First of all, you need to come up with a deal that would get Souness in your newspaper or magazine, and there's a couple more, you know, tales as we go through that are sort of covered off with that as well. This one, you find out how much it's going to cost them, I presume he would have an agent of sort, being one of the first. I think again, go back to the Dak Simpsons. He was one of the guys that they had on their kind of payroll, especially when he went to Italy, and he could do like assignments and things and turn up at different things for them. So they would work that out. They'd phone him maybe on if the magazine came out, say on a Wednesday or a Thursday, whatever day of the week it was, Friday. You'd get somebody phoning him after that particular weekend. So you can incorporate anything that happened that you've missed in the previous midweek, then do your weekend stuff, have a general chit chat, basically come up with the words. I would reckon that some guys, when you do that, they basically just trust you to be the stenographer and take down everything, or add to certain things, or embellish certain things that will make them look good, and you'll live happily ever after. It's not that difficult, but in effect, there are very few columnists, I would imagine, at that time, who would actually have taken time to actually write their own column.
See, because one of the things I've noticed with things like Danny McGrain's column and some others as well, there's a definite feel to it, and there's a definite style which continues through them. So you know, it just makes you think that it's definitely them that are. This is probably their words mostly, if not completely, even if they're not typing it out and sending it away or whatever. So, you know, I'm just wondering what sort of degree the ghostwriting would, as you say, they would embellish things. But I do think there's a style that you sort of pick up as you keep reading them.
You need a decent relationship with the person, so you do. I mean, and you cultivate that over a couple of weeks. You don't want to do something in the first week or first 2 weeks that basically going to get somebody's back up that they never want. I'm never going to speak to that guy again. And you also want to be able to access this person. So that would mean back then, either Graham Souness phoning the guy when he was available, or the guy phoning Graham Souness he's home. No mobile phones then. So it was even more disciplined back then, that you would set a certain time. And again, just to allude to that, I have phoned guys when I worked at the Evening Times or when I worked at the Mirror and all sorts they all had a time that they would want to speak to somebody. Some people, it was like after the Champions League when the highlights were on a Wednesday night, so you end up phoning them at like 11:30.
You'd be up at that time to talk to TalkSport.
I don't even TalkSport was in existence then, but the fact of the matter is that they had people who wanted to be phoned first thing in the morning before it suited them to answer the phone, so they don't need to take the kids to school. And I know that sounds, you know, pretty horrible, sneaky, but it's a bit. But again, it's like, I can't take the kids to school this morning because I need to speak to this guy. You know, and to be honest, on that one individual in particular warned me that I had to phone then, because if I didn't phone, he would really fall out with me, because he just did not want to be taking the kids to school. Again, he will remain nameless.
I was not even going to guess
So
that.
just while we're on this kind of subject, Stuart, could you tell us a wee bit about writing the book with Dodie Weir, how you sort of went about it, and obviously you sort of established a level of trust and you're looking to sort of capture his voice?
Well, that was about, absolutely, the big thing for me was people who read the book and still read the book and come back and saying that in their heads it was Dodie narrating it, which is just like such an accolade. But I mean, Dodie and I have known each other for 28 years, since the 1991 World Cup, and then you know, I sort of knew him on and off, and then an editor of mine at the Evening Times, which wasn't a rugby paper, heard Dodie and I having a bit of banter, and heard Dodie having a bit of banter. I mean, what you're saying there is absolutely spot on, that, you know, people picking up the book last year for Christmas and all the rest of it, and sitting and finishing it in a one-hour and hearing Dodie's voice in their head was, you know, as much as an achievement for me and an accolade for me as it was to be shortlisted for the Telegraph's Sports Book of the Year. Really was, because it's job done then. But for whatever reason, he was a bit reticent to actually write the book.
Was that because he's modest? He doesn't want to tell his story? Did he think he had a story to tell? Or
No, I knew that we were first going to write the book in 2000, so it took us a wee while. Motor neuron disease sort of focused the mind a wee bit in terms of we better get on with this. So he hummed and he had. I think one or two people were sort of whispering in his ear that there might be better deals to be done elsewhere. I wasn't convinced of that, and lo and behold, I was absolutely right that the deal that Black and White Publishing put to him suited all parties. So the 27th, 28th of May was when we first travelled to Coventry in a car journey together, and 5 hours down, 4 hours back up, because I was driving back up, and basically we just sat and talked all the way down and all the way back up, and out of that gave me the bones for what the book was going to be. Doddy thought he'd completed the book in that one car journey, and took exception.
That was easy.
It was easy, exactly. Absolutely, it was like that. You want more? Aye, I need more. We've got 75,000 words to do. Yeah. Do we know 75,000 words? I maybe do. I'll just keep asking you questions. But as it came along, and if you've read the book doesn't. It doesn't follow the traditional sort of path of I was born and then I went to school and then I started playing rugby and this is my first cap, my 6th cap, my 20th cap. The biggest thing in Doddy's life at that point in time was the fact he'd been diagnosed with motor neuron disease. So that was our starting point. And then we had to kind of fall out from that, and then it's joined up, but it's not joined up in the way that you might expect a kind of normal book to be. And a lot, again, so many people came and said that that's what made it enjoyable, because they finished a chapter and then went to look at the next chapter and then found out it started somewhere else in time. So they would read a wee bit, and before they knew it, they'd finished their second box of Ferrero Rocher and were on to their second bottle of red wine and had to go to their bed, but took the book with them and sat in bed and read it for another 3 hours.
That's all you can ask for, is that?
So it's been really well received. Subsequently, all the one-liners, it still has to be a serious book, and a lot of things that Doddy has talked about, I'd basically noted down. So we ended up with this, sort of pile of quotes and anecdotes and mantras and mottos about how he conducted his life, which didn't really fit in anywhere in the book at times, but they were really quite funny and quite enjoyable. So the publisher said, if you've got them, let's use this as let's do a book, and we'll put it out before Christmas as a
stocking
filler type thing. And again, the response from that is incredible, because you've got some people who are in a really low place, and we did a book signing yesterday in Edinburgh, and it's amazing what people latch onto in a moment of desperation, or when they're low in terms of belief, or just low in terms of what's happening to their lives or what's happened to other people in their lives. Wee things, people hook onto it because Doddy said it, and it's almost like a light going on, a beacon, that if Doddy Weir, in terms of his condition, is thinking that I am not alone. You know what I mean? And it can be quite upsetting at times, I have to say. I've got an on-off switch that basically is usually switched off, because if you think about things too much, it can become really quite emotional, and it does for him, But again, sometimes it does just grab you, and you hear stories from people which are just sad, and again, because of the condition, there is only one outcome just now, but there's a lot of ways to get there. There's some people, if you look at it, they can survive year upon year upon year. Other people, it's a slow decline. Other people, it's quite a quick decline, and then it slows down. And other people might not be here 3 months after they've been diagnosed. And that, for me, that's really difficult, especially when you've met somebody somewhere else, and maybe you've asked the question, how's your dad? How's your brother? How's your husband? and they've said, we've actually only come here today to tell you that they're not here. And, you know, that's tough.
Yeah.
Give us a swig of that Benylin again.
That's not Benylin. Right, we're going to ask you some questions here. So you know about the focus on section. So
Yeah.
football. In fact, there's one with John Gregory there, but we're going to ask you them. So we've got a selection of questions here. You can choose not to answer them.
John Gregory, focus on foreign bank accounts.
So full name.
Stewart Weir,
Okay. Place of birth.
Hamilton.
First car.
My first car was a Mini.
Okay. Favourite player.
My favourite player of all time, Davy Cooper.
Okay.
I went to the same school, and when you see somebody basically tearing up St John's Primary in the semi-final of the Shinwell Cup, scoring 6 goals and a 9-1 victory, those kind of things never leave you.
I can only imagine what it was like at that age with those young players around.
He could play, but it was almost like everybody knew he could play, and he knew he could play. Therefore, I'm not saying he was lazy, but you could expect him to play, and he would just do it.
Yeah.
You just knew he was special. And I know people will be cliched, what we talked about maybe earlier about scouting and all the rest of it. I mean, you could see that he was different, but how he was going to use it was probably different in itself as well, given how he got into senior football.
Yeah.
Okay, so favourite team?
Hamilton Accies.
Hamilton Accies. Yeah.
Well, I was born in Bedford Lodge, which is about a goal kick away from where Douglas Park was. My grandparents were in Lawrence Street, which was again maybe a goal kick in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And for 15 pence in the early 70s, you could go and watch Hamilton Accies against all sorts.
Yeah.
You know, and it was again. I will state here. I mean, there was once a press conference at Celtic Park when Jock Brown outed me as a Hamilton Accies fan, in which one of a member of the press corps, who will remain nameless, basically uttered some swear words and basically said, "He's a blue nose." And I think even though Jock was a lawyer and defended me to the hilt, nobody was buying that one. But Jock knew the real story.
Okay, most memorable match?
Well, actually, if it's most memorable match, it's nothing to do with Hamilton Accies, and in fact, it might surprise a few people. My first Scotland-England game at Hampden in 1970, just because I've never seen that many people in a football ground, and I haven't since. My most memorable match, I would have to say, is the 90, and this is. I'm going to say this through gritted teeth. The 1991 Scottish Cup final between Motherwell and Dundee United. I think that was just such an epic match. It was brilliant. It was
The family final, wasn't it, that one?
It was, and the swing of the game, the goals that were scored, the whole emotion of that particular match. You know, and then Big Kirky turning up at the end and scoring the winner. It had absolutely everything, and again, it's one of these games where it's like that's your benchmark is set there, and I have to say nothing really has come close to touching that game. And again, it really appealed to neutrals.
Yeah.
And I think that was the best bit about it. It wasn't Hearts beating Celtic, or it wasn't Aberdeen beating Rangers. It was a game that all the neutrals could actually buy into, because, well, nobody had Motherwell or Dundee United as their second club, right? Unless you were, you know, your name was McLean. But I just thought that was one of the best games I've ever seen in the flesh, ever seen live.
Biggest thrill?
Biggest thrill within football?
Just in your life?
In life? Anytime I get in a car with Colin McRae.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I've gone places and people say, do you want to sit in a passenger ride? Nah, not really. So it's like once you've flown Concorde, why would you want to go up?
Does that mean you're a bit of an adrenaline junkie?
I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say I'm an adrenaline junkie. I mean, you wouldn't find me jumping out of aeroplanes or going bungee jumping and that kind of thing.
You
Not
need
for
to be
me.
on the ground.
Aye. You wouldn't even get me going on on a motorbike, and it's something I have not done for 40 odd years. I mean, I was down in Doddy's farm a couple of weeks ago, and I went on a quad, and that was the first thing, like a motorcycle contraption I had been on in 40 years.
Yeah.
Something because I got too many bad memories of them, but that's another story. But sitting with Colin and actually seeing how good the guy was, because I think I can drive, but when you're looking for an imaginary brake to slow you down or an anchor, and he's basically changing down so he can accelerate again, it's like you have a different world.
Different level. Biggest disappointment?
Can my mother sue me from the grave? No. Biggest disappointment now in my life is not listening to people when I was at school.
Okay.
I should have probably... The things I was good at, I was excellent at. The things that I wasn't so good at, I just chucked it. I'm not interested. And I wish I'd listened to more people at that point in time.
Okay. Best country visited?
Oh, goodness. Ireland.
Favourite food? You know the answer to this one.
Apart from turnips. As you will see from my favourite food. It gives a clue.
Oh no, it's steak and chips, isn't it? That's the classic.
No,
That's
well, it's something I like. I like steak and chips, but I would honestly, if it came to push came to shove, I'd probably say something like steak pie.
It's still steak. I'm taking that.
Well, I still take aye.
Miscellaneous likes. Just a couple of things that you like.
Ah, God, I like things that other people don't like, and I mean seriously, unusual. I love things like the Marx Brothers. I would sit and giggle for a day on end at the Marx Brothers, and have people looking down their nose at me that you could possibly. I like the music of James Last.
Okay.
I am really big into that. I don't know why. It's just something I find particularly pleasing.
Yeah.
And there's one or two other ones. And I do like Guinness.
Okay, fair enough.
As the owners of Gauchos in Edinburgh would tell you after our Christmas day out, and she basically said, I have never seen so few people drink as many pints. I think there was like 7 of us on Guinness. I think we drank about something like 70 or 80 pints.
I'm not impressed with that at all.
That was I Thursday morning.
Miscellaneous dislikes. What don't you like? What drives you mad?
Oh. What drives me mad, maybe just now, and this is the whole political environment, are people who judge you on what they perceive to be your political allegiances when they know nothing about you, and not only that, they then decide that it's reason enough to attack you.
Yeah.
And the whole political discourse just now really does grind my gears in a major way. I don't mind people having different beliefs, different views, but please don't tell me. There was somebody on Twitter trying to tell me about working down mines. And it was like,
What age were they?
They had. I reckon they were born after the miners' strike in 1984, so they would know nothing about mines. So I asked the question: have you ever been down a mine? No. I suppose you're going to tell me you have. Hold my beer. You know what I mean? I used to build coal cutting equipment for a living.
There's been a few conversations where you've went in that direction, and No, I'm dropping out of this. I have no idea.
So don't come back and tell me about unions and politics and all these kind of things, because that was part of my life when it was actually something that was really, really relevant. Not a history lesson from somebody who's basically only getting out of textbook.
It's just reminded me, there's been a couple of times I've posted photographs, it's like old coal adverts or something like that, and
Aye.
you come straight in. That's the XR2 machinery, and I'm like, how do you know that?
So,
But there
yeah,
we go.
It was what- I wish I still had it, but one of my favourite posters out that sort of era was the coal board produced a specific type of anthracite. Right, this is me. I'll get my right just now. Just zip it up for sorry out there, but the person they got to advertise the anthracite was Frank Bruno. Right now, again, we mentioned colour and people referring to things as being black, and I don't think the coal board would have got away with it nowadays. But if there was something that encapsulated that particular product, it was him. It was him. He looked absolutely chiselled with a kind of spotlight coming down just on one side of him, and he was sort of sweated up as well. And that's when you actually you realised and recognised. And I've said to him since then, just what a specimen he was.
Oh, yeah.
He was a phenomenal specimen as a boxer. Probably the first guy that actually went down that road in terms of being a physical specimen rather than any great kind of boxer.
Yeah.
And it served him well, but it was that is what as a memory that I've got out of that kind of era.
Okay, so favourite TV shows?
The Sweeney.
Sweeney.
That's it. Full stop.
Yeah.
Watching.
We were never allowed up to watch the Sweeney because there was always a wee sort of cheeky bit in, isn't it?
Well, there
Wasn't
was, and I used to make sure I used to go to my mate's house who he had a television, a colour television in his room, and I would decant there on the evenings that the Sweeney was on, so I could actually watch it all the way through, because I knew if it was in, if it was at home, we'd end up watching an episode of the or a dog suddenly gets thrown in front of you, so you can't see a risky part of it.
So who's your best friend? This could be.
Oh, I've got several best friends. Doddie's one of them, and a guy who was my number 2 at the Mirror. A guy called Grant MacDonald. He's one of my best friends. I am very fortunate in that I have a lot of really good friends who I don't always need to keep in contact with just for them to stay as good friends.
Yeah.
It's like when we moved house to Hamilton, I moved back to Hamilton, and a guy turned up at the door, and she went, "There's a guy here saying he's into plumber. He's plumb in the wash machine." I went, "Does he have a beard on? Does he have a beard on? Does he not have a beard?" "He's got a beard." "And that's Patrick. Let him in, he'll be fine." She went, "And all the wife, and all the time I've known you, I have never known you to mention this guy. And suddenly he turns up at my house. Do I owe him any money?" "No, just give him a cup of tea and a biscuit, he'll be fine." She went, "You are strange. You've been into things in life that I don't know about."
Probably
yes. Aye.
So last question here. Which person in the world would you most like to meet that you have obviously not met?
That I've not met. I would have to say I would probably like to meet Barack Obama. I mean, I think the whole thing with Nelson Mandela is like was the default for a great many people, but I think that somebody like Obama, and given everything that he achieved when it was supposedly easy, but it could never be easy if it was in the United States, and given the decisions that he had to make in that office, I just think people like that are absolutely it would be fascinating just to talk to them. Underneath that, there's a bundle of sports people, men and women, that I would like to speak to just to ask specific questions of how did you arrive at a certain place, because again, I read very few autobiographies of sportsmen, because some of them I know the bits I've left out.
Yeah.
So what's the point of buying a book or reading a book if I know you've left X, Y, and Z out of it? Not with all sportsmen.
You're thinking, what else have you left out?
Correct.
Yeah.
And there's one in particular who's turned out 2 or 3 books, and I just know that the actual bits that if he included them, he would never need to write another book because it would be a bestseller, but he's never going to go down that road because he might incriminate himself.
Okay, so thanks for that. Let's move back to the...
Thank you.
We've got through just a little bit. This might have to be done in 2 parts. So we'll leave. There's a John Gregory funny focus, so they actually call it a funny focus. And if you read through it, there's not actually much funny. Now, it does mention Pippa D parties. I had to check what a Pippa D party was. Did you know what a Pippa D party was? Yeah, you're shaking your head. You know what a Pippa D party? From what I can gather, it's like a Tupperware party, except it's for children's clothes. Is that about right?
About right, aye.
Yeah.
There were various parties like that, and I can't remember the names for them all, but sometimes you have your Tupperware party, you'd have your Pippa D party, you'd have something else which I remember what I remember was women's underwear, right?
Wow,
and then you would have another one where it was like towels and blankets and sheets and all that, and pillowcases and all that kind of stuff. But what I do remember is being shunted away to my grand's or my Auntie Mary's whenever these parties were, because there seemed to be why would you need to drink as much alcohol when all you're doing is buying a box from my cornflakes? I never quite got into that bit.
It's just an excuse.
It was just an excuse, exactly.
So now, actually through it, I don't think there's that many humorous ones, but I have read a previous one in a different magazine where he was quite funny, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here. So we're moving on to
what I noticed in the John Gregory one. Well, the question TV show you always switch off. Which you were talking earlier on about turning the TV off on Christmas Day. Well, I grew up, the TV was always on. I just think it's an unusual question for now, but the TV was always on in my house, apart from, for some reason, my dad's turned off a TV show called Angels, which was about nurses. For some reason, we sat for half an hour with no TV on. My dad would read a book. But interestingly, the TV show he says that he would
ever since the court case.
The TV show he said he would always switch off was On the Move. Now, I hadn't heard of that, but I looked it up, and it was an adult literacy show. And it was Bob Hoskins.
Correct.
Was in it. And there's one episode on YouTube. Bob Hoskins is in it, and Martin Shaw. Yeah. That really rugged, sexy Martin Shaw.
Shall we give the fact about Bob Hoskins, if I'm remembering correctly?
What's that?
He was the first ever James Bond. Was that Bob Holness? I'm thinking. Yeah, don't worry, we can cut that bit out and it makes it sound as if I know what I'm talking about.
Can we have a beef or bin, please, Bob?
Yeah.
So anyway, so Bob Hoskins plays a kind of a removal man who struggles with reading and writing. It's a great.
It used to be in the wee sort of 5-minute slot after the lunchtime news,
right?
And at weekends it's at different places. It basically was introduced. Do you remember the health and safety kind of messages you got about sailing and
electricity and
all that kind of stuff? Yeah. And it used to fill those slots, and there were books that you could get at the library if you were struggling. If you as you were saying, adult literacy, which again was, it still is to a certain extent, but adult literacy back then was something that people were really embarrassed about. Yeah. I mean, I remember a guy, right? Okay, this is going back to around about this period in time. The guy couldn't read and write, and he got a job in the engineering place that I worked as a runner. Now, that's fine, but if you're a runner, you have to go for guys' breakfast in the morning. So if you've got 17 rolls and sausage, 16 rolls and bacon, 14 rolls and egg, you have to be able to add all of these up and write them down as what you want. And the poor guy struggled, so he would have little signs that he would do, and that was like an egg. So it was literally a wee egg. Square sausage was a square, right? A rectangle was bacon, but cruelly they nicknamed them 1 and 1, because when he counted it all up, he went 1 and 1's 2 and 1 is 3 and 1, and that was how he counted these things. He just couldn't randomly count things up. But one of the guys, when he was working away, actually started teaching the guy how to do it, because he was actually embarrassed that he had actually laughed at this guy's deficiencies and thought, but there's nobody actually else left, or nobody to help this guy as well. So you found out yourself who could read and write, but not always in the best of circumstances.
I think I don't have the experience of it, but I think maybe you didn't know about it unless you had the problem. It wasn't
dyslexia.
something you thought he might not be able to read and write.
Yeah.
He may not. I don't ever remember thinking that, because you assumed at the time everybody could because you could.
That's right.
So it's obviously it's not a noticeable effect from it.
Well, one of my friends is Kenny Logan, and Kenny's dyslexic. And Kenny says his two biggest achievements in life. One was sort of mastering dyslexia, and the second one was beating his wife on Strictly Come Dancing. Right. So, but again, when he said once he'd learned to read, it was like whoosh, a new world. I mean, it's still great amusement when he sends you text messages every now and again. But the fact of the matter is that he conquered it.
Yeah.
And he's in a place where he can conquer it, and society's in a place where they want to conquer it. Whereas back then, with On the Move, I mean, that was a trailblazer.
Mm-hmm. That's it. So we'll take a look. There's a page 11 so we're only at page 11 of 1400. We've got a photograph of Gordon Mayer. Now, Gordon Mayer was a left winger who was born in December 57, so he was 61. He was at Notts County from 76 through to 84. Then went to Lincoln City. He had spent some time at Motherwell, and he played at Clydebank as well before Ayr United. Now, apparently in 2008 he was working in a superstores in Bells Hill, and there's a relatively famous quote. He says, "It's very different from football and not the way you think it'll work out," which I think is a bit of an understatement, to be playing down in England at the top level for so long. I mean, he was a key player for County on the rise to the First Division, and he played in the top flight, scored 9 goals. So, he was a bit of a player. And when he came to Clydebank, I remember, and I think this is generally wingers. Very few wingers are consistent.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. They deliver all the time, and there's a frustration that fans have with them. But you want a winger who will keep going and keep going. They may not get past a defender, not get past a defender, not get past a defender, but that one time they get past could lead to something. So you can't knock these sort of players. They're going to have their good games, they're going to have their bad games. And I think, for me, when I actually saw him, he was one of those players. He was either switched on, in which case Clydebank, you knew we're going to get a good result that day, or he was switched off, and it was like, well, basically we're a man down.
But even at the highest level, that applied. Mm-hmm. Wingers themselves knew if they were going to have a good day or they weren't. I mean, I remember the guy I mentioned earlier on, Davy Cooper. Mm-hmm. Davy Cooper, in the game against Norway in 89 to take us to the World Cup finals. So all we needed was a draw, and famously, thanks to Jim Leighton, all we got was a draw, right? But the fact was that Coop tried to beat the guy in the first couple of minutes. The guy stuck his leg out, and the ball went for a throw. And at that point, Davy knew it wasn't going to be his night. Now he's only tried to beat the guy once, but it was almost like, nah.
I think that's a good point. I think it happens early.
Yeah,
you don't seldom see a winger come into the game, and start, unless something happens to who they're up against, or maybe they change wings or something like that. But it's like pretty early on. I know how many times you're at a game and you think, nah, it's not going to be his day, and you can tell that, or straight off
especially
the
with wingers.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the thing with wingers is you've got to have watched football for a wee while and at a certain level to appreciate the kind of mindset of the winger. Mm-hmm. I mean, today in football, some teams have wingers, other teams have wide guys who will start wide and then cut in the way.
Or you've also got the fullbacks who come overlap.
Correct.
That wasn't really a thing in the past.
Correct.
You had
But it was. I think the whole confidence thing of wingers is so fickle. Yeah,
and I think it's a position. I mean, you've got a goalkeeper that's like nothing else in the park, and I think wingers are a bit like that as well. It's like you're what you have to work in is a different space. I mean, you're pretty much normally quite tight to the wing, and then all you've got is that bit inside.
That's right.
And if you don't make that work, then you're going to be stuck out on that edge while the game's going on. So I think it's a very difficult position. Gordon Mayer was one of those players. When he was on fire, he was on fire. I mean, I think it didn't help his name sort of led to his nickname, which was Nightmare, you know, which was a bit cruel at times, but I think at other times it was. And he was...
There's the Alistair story when he was captain of the Scotland cricket team and played particularly slow innings. His nickname became Bedtime. So,
I love ones like that. I love ones like that. What's the Fitzhall?
Fitzhall.
The one size. That's just, I mean, those are brilliantly thought out nicknames. But since we're here talking about Gordon Mayer, I think it's only right to bring up
certainly
the game, which for me was the greatest football game I've ever been to. So last 11th of May 1991, last game of the season, and Partick Thistle come to Clydebank to Kilbowie. Thistle take the lead. Clydebank get a couple of goals. It's 2-1 at half time. Now at this point, Gordon Dalziel and Ken Eadie are both fighting for the daily record golden boot, and they're both on. Well, I think Dalziel was on 29 or something, and Eadie was on 26, something like that. So if you get to 30 goals, you get £1,000 and the daily record golden boot.
A crate of champagne as well.
Yeah, the champagne. So 2-1 at half time. At this point, Kennedy hasn't scored. We come out.
And Kennedy apparently never scored a professional hat trick in his career up to that point.
So as Tom's alluded to, that changed in the second half. So we came out, and this man here, Gordon Mayer, was absolutely instrumental that day. I've never seen. I mean, we basically pummeled Partick Thistle for that second half, and it was really strange. So Kennedy then scored the hat trick, and I've never seen a team try and get a player to score a goal as much. We were missing, we were chances, it was, saved, blah, blah, blah. And then a couple of minutes from the end, it comes in, Kennedy, header, goal, 7-1, 4 goals. He gets his £1,000 and the daily record golden boot, and as Tom says, a crate of champagne. But on top of that, I believe that the Partick Thistle players were meant to be going on holiday straight after the game, but Jim Lambie was incensed and he cancelled their holiday. John Lambie, sorry, Jim Lambie. See, I'm getting carried away. So I think we chatted with Andy Murdoch, who was the Partick goalkeeper a while back, and he mentioned the fact that it ruined their holiday. But Gordon Mayer, that was one of the games, and I think he also. There was just not long into the next season, we had the same result away to Morton. So we beat that, and I think he played that game as well. So
but it shows you there what the carrots were in football. That's 1991. £1,000, a trophy, a case of champagne. What would it take now for a newspaper to put up a prize that guys would actually be interested in winning? So again, it's another wee kind of niche and another kind of special award that newspapers have lost. It's going out the game because players are earning more than the newspapers can ever provide for.
So I think we're probably going to have to. Would you mind coming back another time and go through the rest of this? Because we've put the work in, so
we might as well.
What I'd just like to say, so as part of the podcast, we're hoping to do 12 episodes in a season, and for each season, I mean that season's our season, not the football season. So 12 episodes, and for each season, we're going to partner up with a charity, and we want it to be a charity that wouldn't normally get access to a great deal of support or funds or things like that. So Back On Side is a charity which we've partnered with for this season. I'm just going to read through what they do. So they say, here in the UK, 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health illness each year. Mental health includes a person's emotional, psychological and social well-being. An obvious, widespread problem, yet it's estimated that only a quarter of sufferers receive ongoing treatment, leaving the majority of the UK population tackling these debilitating issues on their own. Here at Back On Side, we have recognised this ongoing dilemma and are determined to rebuild a society where no young person or adult is left tackling mental health problems alone. So they do a great job supporting young people, adults with mental health problems. There is a lot of the support comes through sport. They were actually one of the sponsors when myself and Robert Burns did the Juniors Legends Tournament during the summer. So they do an absolutely fantastic job. And what we're going to do, so we're going to have a donate button for the podcast that I'll send out on Twitter. And for each £1 that you donate, so you can donate £1, you can donate £100, but £1's fine. For every £1, it's essentially an entry to a raffle. And when we draw that, the winner will get the original magazine that we've just spoke about. We'll get the supersized version that we're using as well. And maybe I'll throw in a couple of goodies from my collection as well. So look out for that. But support Back Onside as well. We'll be sharing their Twitter account and any websites and that on Twitter as well. So absolutely fantastic. And if there's anything that you'd like to have a wee plug for?
No, I'll have a wee chat with you later, and I'll contribute some bits and pieces as well to any raffles you're having. I've got 1 or 2 books signed, of course.
Listen, it's Christmas. It's Christmas, so if you want to give them a wee shout out, then by all means go for it.
No, the books are out. My Name's Doddy is out now in paperback version, and The World According to Doddy is really picking up after the BBC documentary went out about him the other evening. So
will that still be on the iPlayer?
It's still on the iPlayer. It's still to be aired late at night as well on BBC Scotland, and it is going to be network on the Saturday, the 14th of December. At the old 1:15 slot that used to be for boxing from Bethnal Green, for those that can remember Grandstand. It's Doddy who's one more try is going to be broadcast again then, and it'll be network, but it is on the iPlayer. And I have to say, the returns you get on iPlayer or anything that goes online these days is quite astounding. I mean, people say, you don't get the same viewers on TV. You might not, but when people can watch it their leisure, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, the bit that when Doddy made the announcement after a matter of months, watched 3 million times.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And you don't have 3 million viewers in Scotland at any one time.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that. Maybe we will soon. I don't know. But
we'll certainly try. if I can shut up long enough, you can do it all in the one night.
I'll have no chance then. So, but thank you, Stuart, for joining us here. As I say, I would love to get you back again to go through the next third of this, and maybe get you back a third time when we complete it. And from Tom, thank you very much as well.
Thank you.
And from us at Shoot the Breeze, thank you everybody for listening. Please continue to support ourselves, Back Onside, and anybody else who needs support. So until next time, shoot the breeze. We'd like to say a special thanks to Pete Wiley of the Mighty Wah for use of Story of the Blues in the music for our show. You can catch up with Pete on www.petewiley.co.uk, where you can check out the details of upcoming gigs and new music. Thank you, Pete.